The first sound was laughter, sharp, echoing, cutting through the wide rehearsal hall like a blade. And then silence. Every pair of eyes turned toward the small woman standing at the far end of the stage, her hands trembling above a ruined violin. Mira Solen looked absurd beneath the gold chandelier, a mechanic's jumpsuit in a sea of silk and pressed tuxedos. Her violin looked worse, splintered neck, one string snapped, varnish stripped by time and weather. Dust clung to her sleeves like ash. "You lost, sweetheart?" a voice called from the front row. Jonah Vale, star violinist, his bow balanced on one shoulder like a weapon. His smile carried no warmth. "This is the Masters Showcase, not open mic night at the docks." The audience rippled with laughter. Mira didn't move, didn't answer. Her trembling fingers adjusted the broken bridge, a motion slow, deliberate, too precise to be accidental. From the shadows near the conductor's podium, Elias Marin watched. He'd seen hundreds of performers crumble under ridicule, but something about this woman's stillness unsettled him. The tremor looked real, but the eyes, steady, unreadable, belonged to someone who'd faced worse than mockery. "Someone get her off stage," Jonah said, waving dismissively, "before she hurts herself with that antique." A stagehand stepped forward. Mira lifted her head. Just once. "No," she said quietly. The word wasn't loud, but it sliced through the murmur. Her voice carried weight, the kind born of places where silence had cost lives. "I registered," she continued. "By law, any instrument capable of performance qualifies." Jonah scoffed. "That thing? It's a corpse." Mira's hands trembled harder. But when she raised the bow, the shaking stilled, like a storm finding its eye. The hall held its breath. Even the chandeliers seemed to lean in. The first note cracked the air open. Not a melody, a wound, a raw, haunting sound that shivered across marble floors and velvet seats. The broken violin should have groaned, faltered, but under her touch, it sang. Imperfect, beautiful, alive. The laughter died instantly. Each note followed like confession, fragments of forgotten symphonies, echoes of places the audience had never been, bombed churches, quiet hospitals, empty stages after disaster. Her music painted them in invisible light. Jonah's smile faded. He'd trained his whole life for precision, applause, perfection. But this was something else. Something that reached under armor and touched the place people buried their grief. When the final note faded, the silence was deafening. And then, from somewhere deep inside the violin, a single glass string snapped with a soft, mournful ping, like the sigh of a ghost. Mira lowered the bow. Her hands trembled again. No one clapped. The conductor cleared his throat, uncertain. "Miss Solen, was it?" "Yes." Where did you learn to play like that?" She didn't answer, just packed the broken violin back into its cloth case as if sealing a secret. Jonah finally found his voice. "It was a trick, some emotional stunt. You think trembling makes you tragic?" Mira looked at him. Her gaze was calm, unblinking. "No, but truth has a sound. Some people just don't recognize it." The murmur rose again. Questions, whispers, a few uneasy glances from older faculty who swore they'd heard that tone before, years ago, during a memorial concert that had ended in flames. Elias Marin stepped closer. "Your hands," he said quietly. "Nerve trauma?" "Something like that." "From where?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Does it matter?" It did. He knew it did. But something in her voice warned him off. Mira turned toward the exit, each step measured. The hall's polished floor reflected her figure like a ghost walking on water. The audience parted without a word. Only Jonah followed with his glare. "This isn't over," he muttered. "You don't belong here." She paused at the door. Neither did the truth. But it came anyway. When she was gone, the hall seemed smaller, the chandeliers dimmer. Jonah looked down at his perfect instrument, suddenly unsure what perfection meant. Elias stood frozen, a memory clawing its way to the surface, an old photo of a young woman holding a violin with the same fractured bridge, standing among a group of relief musicians after the Seraphine bombing. The reports had said she died when the stage collapsed. Impossible. And yet. He looked toward the door again, but Mira was gone. Outside, winter wind scraped across the courtyard. Mira pulled her coat tight, the tremor returning with every heartbeat. She moved quickly, down stone steps and into the maze of narrow streets that led to the conservatory's maintenance wing. Her room was small, just a cot, a desk, and a wall of instruments waiting for repair. She set the violin gently on the table, fingers tracing the cracks like reading Braille. Beneath the varnish, faint initials were carved into the wood. LS and MS, two names erased from memory. Her reflection in the dark window stared back, pale face, tired eyes, hands that would never be still again. She whispered, "Almost ready." The clock on the wall ticked. Each tremor matched its rhythm. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folded letter, the paper yellowed and creased. A name scrawled at the bottom, E. Marin. She hadn't planned to see him again. Not yet. But fate, like music, had its own timing. The letter's words blurred under her shaking fingers. When the world forgets, return. Let them hear what silence cost. Mira folded it away. Tomorrow, the conservatory would announce the list for the showcase finals. Jonah would be there. So would the press. And for the first time in 5 years, the world would hear her name whispered again. Not as a ghost, as a reckoning. In the darkness, the broken violin gleamed under a sliver of moonlight, its shattered glass string catching the light like a blade. Outside, bells rang the hour. Mira closed her eyes and listened. The war inside her hands was far from over. But tonight, she'd played the first battle, and the world had heard her. Dawn crept over the conservatory like spilled milk, thin and cold. Mira Solen was already awake, sitting on the edge of her cot, hands still trembling from dreams she could not remember. The broken violin lay across her lap, its scars gleaming faintly in the early light. In the silence, she could still hear last night's note, the one that split the hall in two. Awe and disbelief, pity and fear. Truth always left echoes. She stood, folded her blanket, and began her ritual. Tea first, then gloves. The fabric steadied the tremor just enough for her to work. She moved to the bench, tools lined with surgical precision, and began sanding a cracked viola. Her motions were measured, rhythmic, like breathing. But the world outside her door had changed. Whispers spread through the marble corridors like wildfire. Who was she? Where did she learn that sound? Why did the conductor look like he'd seen a ghost? By mid-morning, students gathered in clusters outside her workshop, pretending to check schedules, stealing glances through the small glass window in her door. Some faces curious, some mocking, one fearful. Jonah Vale wasn't laughing anymore. He'd spent half the night replaying her performance in his mind, trying to find the flaw that would make it make sense. There wasn't one. Perfection born of imperfection. It defied everything he believed. When he saw her through the window now, bent over her work like a surgeon, a knot tightened in his chest. It wasn't admiration. Not yet. Something darker. Something that whispered of guilt. At the far end of the hall, Elias Marin stood with the morning roster in hand. He'd hardly slept. The letter. the bombing, the vanished prodigy. 5 years ago, he'd conducted a benefit concert in the ruins of Seraphine. The hall collapsed mid-performance after a second strike. Among the dead, Lyra Solène, first-chair violinist. The world had mourned her. He'd mourned her. Now, a woman with the same eyes, the same hands, broken, trembling, but unmistakable, had appeared with a new name. Coincidence? Or resurrection? He approached her door, hesitated, then knocked. Mira looked up, startled. Her hands froze mid-motion. "Come in." Elias stepped into the room, the air thick with the scent of varnish and pine dust. Instruments lined the walls like silent witnesses. For a moment he said nothing, just studied her face, searching for the girl he remembered in the ashes. "Your performance," he said finally. "It wasn't luck." "No," she answered. "You've played before, professionally." She didn't reply. "I need to know who you are," he said softly. Mira set the viola down. The tremor returned, gentle, insistent. "Names are easy," she said. "Stories are harder." "I've seen that technique before. The phrasing, the bow pressure. It's identical to someone I knew." "Someone dead?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Yes." Mira looked past him, toward the window where sunlight painted fractured patterns across the floor. "Then maybe you're hearing ghosts." He wanted to press further, but something in her voice stopped him. A thin line between confession and collapse. He nodded slowly. "The showcase finals are tonight. You're on the list." "I know. Will you play?" "I have to." "Why?" She lifted the violin case onto the table, fingers resting on the worn clasp. "Because silence has cost me enough." Elias watched her for a long moment, then left without another word. Outside, the hallway hummed with rumor. As soon as the door closed, Mira exhaled, a sound half relief, half grief. She opened the case, revealing not just the broken violin, but a folded newspaper clipping tucked beneath the velvet. A headline in faded ink: "Seraphine Massacre. 6 musicians lost." A photograph: charred stage, shattered instruments, smoke rising like ghosts. Her eyes lingered on the names. Lyra Solène. Dead. Or supposed to be. She touched the paper with shaking fingers. The past was stirring, and tonight it would not stay buried. Across campus, Jonah slammed his locker shut hard enough to make the metal ring. He'd found something that made the knot in his chest twist tighter. Old competition records from 5 years back, an international concert circuit. One name stood out: Lyra Solène, violin virtuoso, presumed killed in Seraphine. Jonah stared at the faded photo beside the listing. Younger, smiling, but the same eyes, the same scar just below the jawline. It couldn't be coincidence. He folded the record and shoved it into his pocket. If she thought she could humiliate him with pity and mystery, she was wrong. He'd expose her, reveal whatever lie she was hiding. He didn't yet realize the truth would break him first. Evening came fast. The final showcase hall glowed under chandeliers, every seat filled. Donors in jeweled gowns, critics with sharpened pens, students vibrating with nerves. Backstage, Mira tuned her violin. The broken string had been replaced with one forged from tempered glass, a prototype she'd designed herself. Fragile, unforgiving, perfect for a final act. Elias approached her quietly. "They're ready for you." She nodded, slipped on her gloves, then pulled them off again. No more hiding. The audience would see the tremor. Let them misjudge. That was the point. She stepped onto the stage. Applause scattered politely, uncertain. Jonah stood in the wings, watching, jaw tight. The first note rang out, clearer, sharper than the night before. The glass string shimmered, catching the light. Her hands shook, but her music did not. Every tremor became part of the rhythm. Every flaw transformed into grace. In the audience, Elias felt his chest tighten. It was her. It had to be. Jonah's breath caught. The sound pierced through his defenses, through pride and resentment, straight into memory. His brother's name etched among the Seraphine dead, one of the stage hands lost in the fire. He hadn't known. Until now. The performance built like a storm, fierce and aching, and when it ended, the hall sat in reverent silence once more. Mira lowered her bow. A single tear slid down her cheek. She whispered something the microphones didn't catch. From the back row, an old woman stood and clapped once. Then again. The sound spread, rippling outward, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Mira didn't bow. She turned, walked off stage, and disappeared into the shadows. Back in her small room, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no return. Only 3 words written inside. We remember, Lyra. She froze, pulse hammering. Someone knew. The ghosts were awake. The paper trembled between her fingers. 3 words. We remember, Lyra. The room felt smaller, the air colder. Mira, Lyra, set the envelope down slowly, as if it might burn her. The handwriting was elegant, precise, familiar. She had not heard her true name spoken in 5 years. Not since the fire, the screams, the stage collapsing into flame. She had buried it with the bodies. Now someone had dug it up. She looked around the workshop, scanning shadows as if the sender might still linger there. The hall beyond was silent, but she could feel the shift. The world tilting toward something inevitable. A knock startled her. She slipped the letter into her sleeve. Come in. Jonah Vale stepped inside. His posture was rigid, his jaw set. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the faint murmur of the hallway. The air between them thickened. I know who you are, he said. Lyra didn't answer. She kept sanding the violin neck on her bench, the rasping sound steady, deliberate. You think you can walk in here, pretend to be nobody, and humiliate me in front of the entire school? You think I wouldn't find out? Still silence. Her eyes never left the wood. Jonah slammed a folded paper onto the table. I found the records, the photos, the reviews. Lyra Solen, the prodigy who died in Seraphine. Except you didn't, did you? The rasping stopped. Lyra's hands hovered mid-air. Her tremor returned. Small, visible. She spoke softly. You shouldn't have looked. I had to, because everything about you is a lie. No, she said, setting the tool down carefully. Everything about me is memory. He stared at her, confused and angry. You faked your death? I buried it, she replied, because the world wouldn't let me live with it. Jonah took a step back. What does that even mean? Lyra turned toward him fully. The light caught her face, tracing the scar along her jawline. You've never carried ashes in your hands, have you? Never heard the sound of a stage burning? I didn't fake anything. I survived. That was the mistake. The words hit like stones. Jonah faltered, pride unraveling under their weight. Why come back? He whispered. Because truth has a sound, she said, and I'm done letting silence own it. She moved past him, reaching for her coat, but Jonah caught her arm, gentle, uncertain now. Who sent you that letter? She froze. How did you? I saw it when I walked in. No return name. His eyes searched hers. You're not safe, are you? Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she opened the door. You should leave, Jonah. He hesitated, then stepped out. But as the door closed behind him, his last glance wasn't anger anymore. It was fear, for her, and maybe for himself. When he was gone, Lyra sank into the chair, heartbeat drumming in her ears. Someone new, someone alive, and if they remembered, they might want her silence again. Across the city, Elias Marin stood in his apartment, the lights off, a single candle burning beside a stack of old concert programs. On the top lay one from Seraphine. He traced the inked name, Lyra Solène, with unsteady fingers. He'd seen the letter slip beneath her door earlier that evening, a shadow in the corridor, gone before he could follow. He should have stopped it, should have warned her, but a part of him had wanted confirmation, proof she truly was who he feared. Now he knew. And with knowing came guilt. He picked up his phone, dialed an old number. "Caro," a voice answered. Rough, wary. "It's Marin. She's alive." A pause. Then, "Lyra?" "Yes." Another silence, heavier this time. "If she's back, they'll know soon." "They already do," Elias said quietly. "Someone left her a message." "Then she's in danger." "I think she always was." Elias ended the call and stared at the candle flame until it blurred. Some ghosts didn't haunt. They hunted. At the conservatory, Lyra locked the workshop and walked the empty corridors. The building groaned with night sounds, pipes whispering, floorboards sighing like tired lungs. She passed the performance hall. The stage lights were off, but she could still see the faint outline of the spot where her bow had fallen hours earlier. A ghost of a ghost. In the foyer, a janitor swept quietly. He nodded without speaking. She nodded back. Small kindnesses mattered in places built on judgment. Outside, the courtyard glimmered with frost. She crossed it slowly, breath clouding the air. The envelope felt heavy in her pocket, like a weight pulling her backward. She reached the gate and froze. Someone was waiting under the lamppost. Tall, coat collar turned up, face shadowed. The figure stepped forward, hands raised in peace. "Don't run," the stranger said. The voice was low, steady. "I came to warn you." Lyra's hand tightened around the letter. "Who are you?" "An old friend. From Seraphine." Her stomach dropped. "That's impossible." "Is it?" The figure stepped into the light. A woman, mid-30s, eyes tired but fierce, a faint burn scar across one cheek. "Not everyone died that night." Lyra stared, breath catching. "Amira?" The woman nodded. "You saved me once. Now it's my turn." Lyra took a step back, disbelief fighting recognition. "They told me you didn't make it. They told everyone that. Easier to bury the truth." Lyra's pulse hammered. "Why now?" "Because the people who set the fire, they're moving again. New city. Same hands pulling the strings." Lyra felt the world tilt. "You're saying Seraphine wasn't an accident?" Amira shook her head. "It never was." The night pressed in. Cold wind swept through the courtyard, carrying echoes of old smoke. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Who sent the letter?" Amira met her eyes. "Someone who wants you silent. Forever." A door slammed somewhere behind them. Footsteps, shadows shifting at the edge of light. Amira grabbed her wrist. "We have to go." Lyra hesitated only a second before following. The frost crunched under their boots as they slipped into the narrow alley beyond the wall. Behind them, the lamplight flickered, then went out. The letter in Lyra's sleeve burned like a brand. The past wasn't done with her. And now, it had a face. They ran through the narrow alleys, boots echoing off cold stone, breath ragged, frost snapping beneath each step. Lyra's heart pounded not from the chase, but from the name echoing in her skull. Amira. Alive. After all these years. The city blurred. Lamp-lit streets, shuttered cafes, posters peeling from brick walls. When they finally stopped, it was in the back courtyard of an abandoned chapel, its steeple cracked and half swallowed by ivy. Amira pressed her back to the wall, scanning the empty street. Only when the silence settled did she turn to Lyra. "Anyone follow us?" Lyra shook her head. "No one I saw." Amira exhaled. "Good. We can't risk being seen together. Not yet." Lyra's voice was unsteady. "You were supposed to be gone. They told me you died?" Amira's lips curved into a tired smile. "So did you." They stood facing each other, the ghosts of a burned stage flickering between them. The last time Lyra had seen her, smoke had been choking the sky and the ceiling was collapsing. She'd dragged Amira out through fire, then lost her in the chaos. Lyra swallowed hard. "Why didn't you find me?" "I tried," Amira said. "But they were watching. Anyone who asked questions disappeared." "Who are they?" "The patrons who funded the concert," Amira replied. "The same ones who sold weapons to both sides of the war while preaching peace through music." Lyra's breath caught. "You're saying the bombing was planned?" Amira nodded. "The concert was supposed to expose them. Someone leaked our schedule. We were the message." The words fell like stones into silence. Lyra looked down at her trembling hands, hands that had pulled bodies from rubble, that still shook every time she touched the strings. "All this time," she whispered, "I thought it was fate. Wrong place, wrong hour." "No," Amira said softly. "It was design." A cold wind swept through the courtyard, rustling the dead vines. Lyra wrapped her coat tighter. "So why now? Why send the letter?" Amira hesitated. "Because they know you survived, and they know you're playing again. You're too visible, too dangerous." Lyra met her eyes. "Then why warn me?" "Because you carried me out when the fire came," Amira said. "You didn't let go. I owe you my life." Trust flickered between them, fragile, uncertain, but real. They entered the chapel through a side door. The pews were coated in dust, sunlight spilling through fractured stained glass. Amira lit a single candle. The small flame painted their faces in gold and shadow. From her coat, she pulled a folder, worn, edges torn, stamped with faded seals. "I stole this from a storage unit near the border. It's part of the original investigation file. The official report says an enemy strike hit the hall. But these," she spread photographs across the pew, "these show shaped charges planted under the stage." Lyra's pulse quickened. The images were grainy but clear. Metal casings, wiring, evidence, proof. She picked up a photo with trembling fingers. "They used us," she said, voice hollow. "Used the music. Used the audience." Amira nodded. "And then buried the truth under medals and memorials." Lyra stared at the pictures until they blurred. The tremor in her hand worsened, a storm she couldn't still. Amira placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Lyra looked up. "What do you want me to do?" "Expose them," Amira said. "You have the stage again, the audience, the attention. Let the world hear the truth." Lyra shook her head. "If I speak, they'll silence me." "They already tried." "And if you stay silent," Amira replied, "they win again." The candle flickered, casting shifting patterns across the cracked altar. Lyra watched the flame dance, remembering the inferno that had taken everything. The screams, the smell of smoke, the sound of collapsing beams like thunder. Her voice was a whisper. I thought if I kept quiet, the ghosts would rest. They won't, Amira said. Not until the truth breathes. Lyra closed her eyes. The images rose unbidden, her team laughing backstage, tuning instruments, believing they were safe. And then the explosion. Fire swallowing sound. Survival had been punishment, not gift. She opened her eyes again, steady now. If we do this, we need proof beyond photos. Amira reached into the folder once more and slid out a small flash drive. This holds recordings, emails, financial trails, enough to bury them if it gets out. Lyra took it carefully, feeling its weight like a key. Who else knows? No one I trust, Amira said. Not anymore. Lyra slipped the drive into her pocket beside the letter. Then we start with the music, she said quietly. One final performance. The truth hidden inside the notes. Amira frowned. You're going to play it? Yes. The requiem we wrote for Seraphine. The one they banned after the bombing. Amira's eyes widened. You still remember it? Every measure, Lyra said. Every breath. They left the chapel just before dawn, the city pale and waking. A new day rising over old wounds. By the time Lyra reached her room, the halls of the conservatory were stirring. Students whispered, eyes tracking her as she passed. Jonah leaned against the wall near her door, face pale. You vanished last night. I needed air, she said. He studied her. You're planning something. Lyra didn't answer. He stepped closer, voice low. Whatever it is, it's bigger than this place. I can feel it. She met his gaze. Then you know to stay out of it. Jonah hesitated, then nodded. Not this time. I owe you more than mockery. Lyra moved past him, unlocking her door. Inside, the broken violin waited on the table. She set the flash drive beside it, its metallic sheen catching the light like a promise. She sat, pulled out a blank score sheet, and began to write. Each note deliberate, measured. The truth translated into melody. Outside, bells rang the morning hour. Somewhere deep in the city, unseen eyes watched her window. The smoke from Seraphine had never truly cleared. Now, it was rising again. Lyra paused, pen hovering above the paper. She whispered to the empty room, If they want silence, they'll have to earn it. Morning light poured through cracked blinds, painting stripes across Lyra's face. She hadn't slept. The sheet music lay open before her, notes scrawled in black ink, fierce and trembling. A requiem for the dead, a confession for the living. Each measure carried a name, each chord, a wound. Every silence, a scream she could not let die. The flash drive sat beside her teacup, small and cold, a shard of the truth. She hadn't plugged it in yet. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she already knew what she would find. The tremor in her right hand was worse this morning. Her fingers twitched against the paper, the pen trembling like a compass in a storm. She pressed them flat against the desk, breathing slow, remembering what the doctors had said after Seraphine. Permanent nerve damage. You'll never play again. They were wrong. They didn't know what desperation could teach the body. Her reflection in the window looked older than 30, eyes hollowed by years of silence, scars faded but never gone. The woman staring back was not the prodigy the world had adored. She was something harder, something forged in fire. A soft knock startled her. She hid the flash drive beneath a pile of sheet music. When she opened the door, Elias Marin stood there, coat collar turned up against the chill. I need to talk, he said. Lyra stepped aside. He entered quietly, gaze scanning the cramped room, the scattered papers, the single instrument resting on the table like an old friend. "You haven't changed much," he murmured.
"I've changed completely," she replied. He hesitated. "The letter. I saw it." Her chest tightened. "You followed me." "I was worried," he said simply. "And I was right." Lyra crossed her arms. "What do you want, Elias?" "The truth," he said. "Not rumors. Not ghosts." She looked at him for a long moment, then turned toward the violin. Her hand hovered over it. "When the hall collapsed, I should have died with them," she said. "I remember the heat, the sound, like the world tearing open. I dragged Amira out. The beam came down behind us. Everything went dark." She paused. The silence filled with ghosts. "When I woke, I was in a field hospital near the border. They said they found me in the rubble, half buried. I couldn't speak, couldn't hold a spoon. My hands shook so badly the nurses had to feed me." Her eyes met his. "I thought the universe was punishing me for surviving." Elias's throat tightened. "You saved lives." "I lost 6, she whispered. "The rest doesn't balance." He took a step closer. "You didn't owe them death." "No," she said softly. "But I owed them memory." Her gaze dropped to the sheet music. "That's why I came back. To make them hurt again." Elias followed her eyes, scanning the score. The notes looked like battle scars, dense, defiant. "This is the Requiem?" She nodded. "The one they buried with us." He reached for a page. "You're going to play it at the next performance?" "Yes." "They won't let you." "They'll try." He studied her trembling hand, the quiet fury in her voice. "You could be killed for this." Lyra smiled, small and sad. "I already was." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, wind rattled the window pane. Somewhere down the hall, a piano struck a hesitant chord, the sound lingering like a prayer. Elias broke the silence. "There's something else you should know. Jonah's been asking questions. He's not your enemy anymore." "I don't need allies." "Yes, you do," Elias said gently. "You're not fighting sound anymore. You're fighting silence." She said nothing, but the words stayed with her. After he left, she turned back to the flash drive. The small light glinted under her desk lamp, daring her to face it. Her fingers hovered. Then she slid it into her laptop. The screen flickered. Folders appeared. Seraphine, internal files. She opened the first. Emails, bank transfers, names. One stood out immediately. Patron Consortium for Peaceful Progress. The same organization that had sponsored the concert. The same one funding the conservatory today. Her breath hitched. A chain of messages scrolled across the screen. Orders, payment confirmations, and one chilling subject line. Collateral acceptable if exposure risk contained. Lyra covered her mouth. The tremor shook through her entire arm. They hadn't been victims. They'd been pawns. She clicked another file. Surveillance images. Faces she recognized from charity galas, music awards, government briefings. Smiling benefactors. Silent killers. Her stomach twisted. One photograph made her freeze. Elias. Standing beside the patrons at a fundraising event a month before the bombing. Her vision blurred. She scrolled through the captions. He hadn't signed anything. No messages from him. No direct involvement. But he'd been there. In the orbit. Close enough to know. Close enough to be used. She slammed the laptop shut. The room spun with questions. Had he known? Had he been a witness or a weapon? The urge to confront him rose sharp and hot, but another thought cut through. What if he didn't know? What if they used him too? She pressed her palms against her eyes. Her pulse thundered. When she opened them again, the sun had faded. The city glowed in the blue hush of evening. She stood, moving to the window. In the reflection, her face looked divided, half in shadow, half in light. She whispered to the glass, "You can't hide forever." She gathered the sheet music into a folder, slipped it into her case beside the broken violin. The flash drive she kept in her pocket, close to her heart. Tomorrow, the conservatory would host its annual Founders Gala. Patrons, press, and the entire city would be watching. It was the perfect stage, the perfect trap, the perfect truth. She sat once more at the desk and practiced in silence, her fingers ghosting over the strings without sound. The tremor made each motion a battle, each gesture a victory. When the final movement rested beneath her hands, she closed her eyes and saw them all. Amira's determined eyes, the musicians lost to flame, the audience that never made it out. She whispered their names like a prayer. Then she opened her eyes, and the fear was gone. Tomorrow they would hear what silence had cost. The gala night arrived, draped in silver and suspicion. Lights spilled from the conservatory's arched windows, washing the courtyard in gold. Cars lined the cobblestone drive. Guests in black and shimmered gowns stepped through the doors, laughter ringing too bright. Inside, the hall had been transformed. Chandeliers blazed. Velvet banners hung from the ceiling, bearing the crest of the patron consortium, the same emblem stamped across the files on Lyra's laptop. Lyra stood backstage, her violin resting in her hands like a heartbeat. She wore a simple black gown, plain beside the glittering performers. The tremor in her fingers caught the light, subtle but constant. She didn't try to hide it. Tonight wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. Jonah approached quietly, dressed in formal black, bow tie crooked. He carried no instrument, just a nervous energy he couldn't disguise. "You're really going through with this," he said. "Yes." "You read the files?" "I did." "And you saw—" "Yes," she said again. "Including Elias." Jonah shifted uneasily. "Do you think he knew?" Lyra looked down at her hands. "I don't know. But tonight, we'll find out." From the far side of the stage, Elias appeared, speaking with the conductor. His expression was calm, but there was tension in his shoulders, a man carrying something he couldn't drop. When he caught Lyra's eyes, he gave a faint nod. It looked like reassurance. It felt like warning. The conductor raised a hand. "Places!" Jonah squeezed Lyra's arm. "If anything happens—" "It already has," she said softly, then stepped onto the stage. Applause rippled through the hall. Rows of faces glowed in the light, donors, politicians, critics, and in the front row, the patrons themselves, seated like monarchs at court, smiles fixed, eyes sharp. Lyra bowed once, then lifted her violin. The first note cut through the room, low, solemn, heavy with memory. Gasps fluttered from the audience. They recognized it. The opening of the Seraphine Requiem, a piece banned after the bombing, declared too divisive, too painful, too close to the truth. But she played it anyway. Each phrase rose like smoke, curling through the chandeliers. Each silence throbbed with ghosts. Her hands shook, but her bow never faltered. The tremor became rhythm, the flaw became signature. The melody carried names, every musician lost in the fire, every note a memorial carved in sound. In the shadows, Elias watched, breath caught in his chest. The music was identical to the one from that night. He felt the heat, the ash, the roar of collapsing beams. His own memory cracked open. A conversation in a hotel corridor, a warning he hadn't understood, a handshake with a man in a black suit. Now he saw it for what it was, a deal sealed with silence. Lyra's final note lingered like smoke before vanishing into stillness.
Then, nothing. No applause. Only breathless quiet, thick as fog. In the front row, a woman in diamonds leaned toward the others. Her smile never wavered, but her whisper carried like a blade. "She knows." The words sliced through the stillness. Lyra lowered her violin, meeting the patron's eyes one by one. "You built memorials for the dead," she said, "but you never told the world why they burned." A ripple of unease swept through the hall. Security shifted along the walls. Elias stepped forward, heart hammering. "Lyra." "No more silence," she said. "Not tonight." From her sleeve she pulled a small drive, holding it up to the light. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. "This holds your truth," she said, voice steady. "Your signatures, your transactions, your names." The patrons stayed perfectly still, the calm of predators before a strike. Elias crossed the stage toward her. "You don't understand what you're doing," he whispered. "They'll destroy you." "They already tried," she said. "I'm still here." She turned back to the audience. Seraphine was no accident. It was a message, funded, planned, and buried by those who profited from war. Her voice broke but didn't falter. Music was supposed to heal. You turned it into a weapon. Gasps, murmurs. The hall fractured into whispers and disbelief. Elias reached her side, eyes dark with fear. "Give me the drive." "No." He hesitated, torn between protection and betrayal. "Then at least let me walk you out." But the security guards were already moving, dark suits cutting through the crowd. Their smiles were polite, their eyes anything but. Jonah rose from his seat, stepping into the aisle. "She's telling the truth," he shouted. "I saw the records too." Two guards blocked him instantly, firm but silent. Elias grabbed Lyra's arm. "We have to go, now." She nodded once. Together they slipped behind the curtain as murmurs swelled to chaos. In the backstage corridor, footsteps thundered behind them. Elias led her through service doors, down a narrow staircase into the dim maintenance wing. "Where are we going?" Lyra whispered. "Somewhere they won't follow." They burst into the cold night through a side exit. The courtyard was empty now, the lamps humming softly in the dark. Frost glittered like shards of glass. Lyra clutched the drive in her fist. "They'll come." "I know," Elias said, "but not tonight. You gave them a show they can't erase." He turned to face her fully. "I didn't know, Lyra. About Seraphine, I swear." She searched his eyes, saw the cracks, guilt, shame, something close to truth. "I believe you," she said, "but believing won't save us." He nodded. "Then we run." A car pulled up at the edge of the courtyard, headlights cutting through the dark. Amira stepped out from the driver's seat, urgency etched into every line of her face. "They know," she said. "You lit the fire again." Lyra opened her palm, showing the drive. "Now we finish what they started." Behind them, the great windows of the conservatory glowed with restless light. Patrons shouting, guards moving, history stirring. Lyra turned once, looking back through the frost. Inside, the chandeliers flickered, reflections like 1,000 eyes watching her go. The night held its breath, and somewhere in the shadows, a camera clicked. The night, headlights slicing fog, the city fading into shadow behind them. Lyra sat in the back seat beside Elias, the flash drive clenched in her trembling hands. Amira gripped the wheel, eyes fixed on the empty road. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, fragile, a held breath before the storm. The highway unfurled through hills like a scar. Lyra watched the frost glimmer on the asphalt, memories rising with the dawn. The fire, the smoke, the names carved in ash. And now, the proof burning a hole in her palm.
Elias broke the silence. "Where are we going?" Amira answered without looking back. "A friend's studio. Secure line. Global reach." Lyra turned to him. "Once it's out, they can't stop it." He nodded, jaw tight. "Then we'd better make sure it's real." They arrived at a warehouse near the docks. Steel doors rusted, windows dark. Inside, the air smelled of dust and salt. Rows of old equipment lined the walls, mixers, transmitters, servers humming like tired hearts. A man stepped from the shadows, broad-shouldered, eyes wary. "This her?" he asked. Amira nodded. "Lyra Solen." His gaze softened. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet," she said quietly. He gestured toward a desk cluttered with monitors. "You have something the world needs to hear?" Lyra placed the flash drive on the table. "And something it's tried to forget." He slid it into a console. The screens flickered. Files bloomed open. Documents, transactions, grainy photos, voices from buried years. Elias leaned closer, scanning the data. "It's all here. Names, payments, orders." Amira crossed her arms. "We stream it to every major outlet. Recorded, encrypted, mirrored. Once it goes live, it can't be pulled." The man typed commands, fingers swift. "Give me 10 minutes." Lyra moved to a cracked window. Outside, the horizon bled pale gold. Dawn. Her reflection stared back. Hollow eyes, trembling hands. No turning back now. Elias joined her. "When the world sees this, they'll come for you." "They already have," she said. "At least this time they'll know why." He hesitated. "What happens after?" "I play," she said simply, "until the silence ends." Behind them, the hum of the servers grew louder. Lights blinked like pulse beats. The man turned. "We're live." Lyra stepped forward. The microphone waited, small and cold. She spoke softly, voice steady despite the tremor. "My name is Lyra Solen. 5 years ago, at the Seraphine Peace Concert, 6 musicians died in an explosion. The world called it an accident. It wasn't." Her words echoed through the room, through the airwaves, into the world. She continued, each phrase deliberate, a measured confession. "The attack was orchestrated by those who profited from both war and peace. The patron consortium funded the event. They buried the evidence. They buried us." She paused, breath shivering. "But the dead do not stay silent." The man uploaded the files one by one, broadcasting images, emails, signatures. Proof undeniable. Across the world, screens flickered awake. News anchors froze mid-sentence. Phones buzzed in offices. The truth traveled faster than fear. Elias watched her, awe and sorrow tangled in his eyes. "You've done it," he whispered. Lyra didn't answer. She was listening. To the hum of the servers, the faint echo of her own heartbeat, the weight of ghosts easing at last. But outside, tires screeched. Amira spun toward the door. "They're here." Headlights sliced through the warehouse windows. Dark figures spilled from black vehicles, men in suits, faces unreadable. The man at the console typed frantically. "Transmission's complete. They can't stop it now." Elias grabbed Lyra's arm. "We need to move." Gunmetal glinted at the door. Orders shouted. Footsteps thundered closer. Amira pulled a pistol from her coat. Compact, worn. "I'll hold them." Lyra shook her head. "No one else dies for this." "It's too late for choices," Amira said. She fired once, not at the men, but at the ceiling light. Glass shattered, plunging the room into shadow. "Go!" she shouted. Elias pulled Lyra toward a side exit. They stumbled into a narrow alley, breath steaming in the cold. Behind them, shouts rose, footsteps scattering.
They ran toward the docks. The sea lay black and endless, waves striking stone like drums. Sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere, the city was waking to truth. They reached the edge of the pier. Lyra bent, gasping, her hands trembling so hard she nearly dropped the violin case slung across her shoulder. Elias steadied her. "You're shaking." "I always am," she said. "But the world's shaking now, too." He looked back at the warehouse, lights flashing, figures swarming. "You've lit a fire they can't put out." She nodded. "Good." For a moment, the wind carried only the sound of waves, low, relentless, like the beating of distant drums. Elias turned to her. "Where do we go now?" Lyra opened the violin case. Inside lay the instrument, scarred, patched, a survivor. She lifted it gently, bow trembling in her hand. "Anywhere they can hear," she said. She raised the bow and played, soft, mournful, a melody that rose over the water. The sound shimmered through the dawn, fragile but unbroken. Elias watched her, realizing that the performance wasn't for applause. It was a requiem, for the lost, for the silenced, for the truth finally set free. Behind them, the warehouse lights flickered out. Ahead, the sea stretched wide, endless. Lyra lowered the violin. Her eyes met his. "It's done," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "No, it's begun." From the city, church bells rang, deep, resonant, echoing across the harbor. With each toll, the world shifted a little more. Lyra stood still, wind whipping her hair, the tremor in her hands glinting like glass in sunrise. She could feel them, the ghosts, standing with her now, no longer trapped in silence. Somewhere behind the rising light, sirens still called. But in her chest, for the first time in years, there was quiet. Not peace, but purpose. By morning, the world had changed. Screens across continents flashed headlines. Seraphine Truth Exposed. Patron Consortium under investigation. Survivor revealed. Lyra Solène speaks. The footage of her broadcast looped endlessly. Her calm voice, her trembling hands, the damning files unfurling behind her. Some called her hero. Others called her traitor. All called her real. In the chaos, she vanished. The warehouse raid yielded nothing but empty rooms and echoes. The agents found no trace of her or Elias. Only a single violin string left on the floor, glinting like a shard of light. Days passed. The storm swelled. Protests erupted outside government halls. Investigations tore through gilded offices. Patrons once untouchable were dragged before cameras, faces pale beneath flashbulbs. Denials fractured under evidence. The world finally listened, not out of kindness, but shock. And somewhere far from the noise, in a small coastal town with gray waves and quiet mornings, Lyra watched from the window of a rented room above a shuttered cafe. Her reflection stared back, thinner now, softer somehow. The tremor still there, faithful as a heartbeat, but the weight behind it lighter. On the table beside her sat an old radio. The announcer's voice crackled through static. "The Seraphine files have triggered international hearings. Arrests are underway. Survivors still unaccounted for. The woman known as Lyra Solène remains missing." She turned the volume down. The world could speak without her now. Elias entered, carrying a bag of bread and coffee. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, but the weariness carried peace. "They're calling it the Requiem Revolution," he said. "You started something." Lyra smiled faintly. "Music travels faster than bullets." He set the food down. "Amira's safe. She sent word. The files are mirrored in 100 places. They can't erase them." "Good." Lyra wrapped her hands around the coffee mug.
The warmth steadied her fingers. Then we've done what we came for. Elias sat opposite her. What will you do now? She looked out the window, gulls wheeling over the tide, the horizon stretching pale and endless. Live quietly. Play when I can. You could return, he said softly. People would listen. I don't need them to, she replied. They've heard enough. The truth's louder than I ever was. He nodded, accepting what she already knew. Her life wasn't meant for stages anymore. It was meant for silence, a silence she'd earned. They ate in peace. Outside, the sea kept its rhythm. Weeks later, she walked the shoreline alone at dusk. The wind was gentle, the air thick with salt and memory. She carried no violin, only a small notebook. Inside were sketches of music, fragments, unfinished melodies. She stopped near a cluster of rocks where the waves whispered softly, and sat. From her coat, she drew a folded photograph. The Seraphine Ensemble, 6 faces frozen in light. She traced each one with trembling fingers. Reynard, Lucia, Amira, Tomas, Eva, Aaron. Names spoken into the wind, not eulogies, invitations. She closed her eyes and listened, the distant hum of the ocean blending with the faint echo of her requiem. The ghosts were quiet now, not gone, just resting. A figure approached along the shore, Jonah, shoulders hunched against the wind. He carried a small parcel wrapped in cloth. I thought you'd left, Lyra said as he neared. I tried, he admitted, but you left something behind. He handed her the bundle. Inside was her old violin, restored. The cracks sealed, the body polished, a new string gleaming where the glass one had shattered. I fixed it, he said. Not perfect, but it plays. Lyra held it gently, tears pricking her eyes. Thank you. He smiled, awkward, humbled. I didn't understand before, what you carried, what you gave. You do now. He nodded. The conservatory's changing. Students talk about you like myth. Let them, she said. Truth needs stories. Jonah hesitated. Will you play again? She looked out across the water, the horizon painted gold. Not for crowds. Maybe just here. He followed her gaze, then turned to go. If you ever need a stage, he said, you have one. She watched him disappear into the twilight, the sand swallowing his footprints. When he was gone, she lifted the violin and set it beneath her chin. The tremor ran through her fingers, familiar, forgiving. She drew the bow across the strings. The sound rose soft and clear, blending with the waves. No grandeur, no audience. Just truth, carried on salt air. She played until the sun slipped beneath the horizon, until the world dimmed to gray and the notes faded into dusk. When she lowered the bow, the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was whole. She whispered to the sea, "We're free." Months later, in cities far away, people still spoke her name. Children studied the Requiem in music schools. Journalists traced the files she'd released. Governments rewrote laws under the weight of exposure. But Lyra remained a rumor, a ghost in the margins, glimpsed in train stations, in quiet towns, always carrying a violin case. Some said she played for the forgotten. Some said she disappeared into the mountains. Some said she never existed at all. The truth was simpler. She lived. She listened. She played when the silence asked. In a small coastal cafe, an old radio played her Requiem at dawn. The owner said the composer sometimes visited, sitting in the corner with shaking hands and a soft smile. No one ever asked her name. Because by then, the world understood. Names fade. Truth doesn't. And when the music rose, fragile and unbroken,
Those who listened swore they could hear something beyond the notes. The sound of fire turned into light. Grief turned into grace. Silence turned into song. Lyra Solen, a whisper, a melody, a promise. The rest between notes.